The anime opens up with a raging storm that befalls the promised land. A man clad in robes walks towards a boy, down on his knees, face filled with distress and fright. The man smirks a menacing smirk, wrapping the boy with his chains of justice, telling him his very existence is a sin, and so must be tested. Moments later, the entire land is caught under a destructive bomb, engulfing everything in its path, leaving nothing but debris. We are now transferred to a much lighter environment. Mrs. Kate is searching frantically for Master Oz, who is busy hiding away from her. It is the coming of age for Master Oz, the heir to Bezarius, one of the 4 great dukedoms. Master Oz, along with Gilbert, his caretaker, hide away from Mrs. Kate in Master Oscar's room, who explains the importance of the ceremony that awaits them and how beautiful the place was before the tragedy of Sablier. The children run away to a secret place, where Oz starts hearing a familiar sound, a light music. He follows the sound and ends up falling in an underground graveyard with only one grave. On top of the grave is placed a vintage watch, which Oz grabs and is all at once transported to another dimension. Dolls of every type and kind aline the cupboards and tables around him, cackling in pure joy and saying that he is finally here. Eyes open with shock, Oz has no idea where he is until a young girl emerges from the darkness, telling him how happy she is that he is back. How everyone left her, but he stayed by her side. However, her attitude transforms and she pounces over Oz. Bubbling with hatred and anger, he tells him she will rip him apart, and wherever he may hide, she will find him. Oz snaps back to reality, dismisses the traumatic image that he saw, and proceeds to get ready for the ceremony. Meanwhile, the stranger in robes possesses Gilbert's body and waits patiently for the ceremony to start. The time for the ceremony has come. Nobles and family members from far-off lands make their way to the Holy Palace to attend the ceremony. Miss Sharon, the granddaughter of the Rainsworth family, has also made way to the ceremony. Oz meets Miss Sharon and is unable to take his eyes off her beauty and grace. However, due to being younger than 15, she could not attend the ceremony and only came to give her regards. Leaving the room with her trusted advisor Bray, before parting, she provides Oz with some wisdom about his new position as heir to Bezarius. Everyone is in position for the event to start. Oz proceeds with the ceremony and gets ready to say his oath, but the moment he completes it, the grand clock that hasn't worked for over 100 years lets out its first chime. The mysteriously cloaked people who refer themselves as Reapers break into the Holy Palace. Gilbert threateningly grabs Oz and produces a sharp knife from behind him, cutting his shoulder up, allowing drops of blood to ooze out and fall on the ground. The drops of blood carve a path to the abyss, allowing the Reapers to now judge Oz. However, their act is cut short with the appearance of none other than Bee Rabbit, the girl who Oz saw in his vision when he held the Pandora clock. A devilish smile accompanying her, Bee Rabbit warns the Reapers to not lay a hand on Oz, otherwise there will be serious consequences. The Reapers pay no heeds and produce their weapons to fight her. Even so, their small swords stand no chance against her enormous scythe, which easily withstands their small hits. Swords clatter against Bee Rabbit, rubble and dirt mixing with a thunderous storm. Bee Rabbit moves faster than before, off script, and unprepared the Reapers take full might of her powers, falling left and right. Gilbert gains control of his senses and notices who the leader of the Reaper is, but before he can warn Oz, he gets a critical hit by Oz himself, leaving a mark on his chest. A frightened look in his eyes, Oz falls on his knees, allowing the Reaper leader to judge and finally send him into the abyss. The next day, Miss Sharon, Brake, and another man sit in the empty Holy Palace and make plans to rescue Oz. Oz wakes up from his deep slumber, praying to God that whatever happened before was just a bad dream. But his wishes doesn't appear true, since he can see the wreckage of the abyss he had landed in. Picking himself up, Oz explores the abyss for food, but instead comes in contact with puppets and dolls that call themselves chains. A particular doll with half ripped off hair and protruding eyes manages to make Oz's life a living nightmare. Running circles and attempting to kill him, Oz frantically runs away from the little creature, To his rescue comes none other than B Rabbit, or Alice, which he tells him to call her by. Explaining the dynamics of the abyss and if they wish to escape, Oz has to agree to a contract with her, allowing her to release her full potential and escape the abyss world. Oz reaches out to agree with Alice's kind words but gets swooped away by Sharon, who with an alarmed look warns him of Alice's trickery and thirst to kill her contractors after using them. Somehow Oz finds Sharon not so reliable, and his assumption proves correct when her head turns a full 180, half of her face ruined, still holding on his hand. The so-called Sharon transforms into Mad Baby. Likewise, Alice comes to his rescue again, fighting off the demonic chain, but gets eaten up instead. Oz doesn't back down and charges onto the terrifying-looking baby, forcing himself into its mouth. Holding onto Alice's hand, he agrees to a contract which releases the full force of Alice's powers. Emerging from the pool of blackness is Alice. Intertwining her fingers with Oz, she seals the contract with a kiss. Her soul merging with his, Oz escapes the abyss, landing into the Holy Palace unconscious. Coming back to his own dimension, Oz is taken to a safe place by Sharon, Break, and Raven, a man who could seal the powers of Alice. Oz wakes up and gets reassurance from Break that he is no longer in the abyss, but in the real world, seemingly pushing him to disclose about his encounter during his temporary stay in it. Oz opens up about facing monsters called chains, and a certain chain called Alice with whom he now has a contract. Break gives off a carefree attitude and talks about all three of them being a part of an organization called Pandora, who conducts research related to the abyss. They arrest Oz and try to take him to their headquarters. However, he is possessed by Alice, who takes Sharon as hostage. That encounter is short-lived when Break taps into a magical circle to separate the two souls. Not holding back on hitting Alice with a stick, Oz stops the beating by coming in the way. The Pandora watch opens up a door to the abyss, allowing a chain to escape and look for a contractor. A look of malice crosses Break's face, who orders Raven to remove the seal on Alice's powers. Alice's powers reach sky high, allowing her to chain up the monster, tearing it to shreds. Break then discloses his plan to use them to find the citizens of Baskerville, who had sent Oz to the abyss, and in return are free to locate Alice's memories, which he has been searching all her life for. They agree to his terms. They get their first mission, which is to locate an illegal contractor and chain in Northumbria that has been on a killing spree for quite some time now. Alice objects to the quest, but finally agrees when she gets the initiative of maybe finding her memories where the chains are. Together with Raven, they head out to the town. Alice, mesmerized by the huge crowd and different delicacies, wanders away from the group to get a bite, making Raven search for her. Oz comes across a beggar girl selling flowers on the streets, where everyone ignores her very existence. Oz helps her with the flowers, dazzling her with his romantic, childish skills before going back to Raven and Alice. A demonic voice seizes the young flower girl. No passion, anger, or real emotions, just a deep, dark voice, demanding to get a bite of Alice. The trio stay at an inn nearby. Alice throws a tantrum about wanting to find her memories before consequently falling to sleep. Raven explains how the ink cues around Oz's chest is a time clock which ticks every time Alice uses her powers. Until finally, once it is completed, the contractor and chain gets taken to the deepest part of the abyss. Raven and Oz leave to locate the illegal contractor and chain, letting Alice sleep in peace. On the other end, in a huge mansion, a chain devours the bodies of its residents, the flower girl being its contractor. The chain notices the incubus to be nearing its end, demands to be taken to Alice to eat her, breaking into the inn like a bloodthirsty monster. Alice avoids the encounter, allowing Raven and Oz to return in time. Raven shoots at the chain, point blank at its head, making it fall. The flower girl gains back her consciousness, but it's too late. The incubus is complete, allowing both to be dragged into the abyss. The horrific image now lives rent-free in poor Oz's head forever. Back at the Pandora's headquarters, Oz is now a traumatized young boy, feels the guilt of not saving the young flower girl from an ill fate. Nonetheless, he still manages to muster up a smile and makes plans to help Alice find her memories. For this, he wishes to return to the Holy Palace where he had discovered the Pandora watch, and where the trail of events had begun. On their way to the Holy Palace, Oz gets a bad dream where he sees little Gilbert reassuring him that he will always be by his side, through thick and thin, followed by images of his father behind a veil. They reach the Holy Palace, but for Oz, it seems completely different than the way he had imagined it to be. Dilapidated, broken, and not taken care of. The area now looks like a graveyard. Raven proceeds to scan the area out for any danger, leaving Oz and Alice alone. Oz remembers the good old days with Gilbert and how they were best friends through all their problems. Just then, a gust of wind shakes the trees from their roots, followed by a shriek, alerting Oz and Alice to run towards the Holy Palace. Raven, on the other hand, is met by one of the members of Baskerville, who appears with her chain called Gledum, that uses threads to manipulate the minds and bodies of her captives. It is at this moment that Oz learns the truth. He emerged from the abyss 10 years later. Raven in actuality is Gilbert, but much older, and finally, he is the key to the will of Abyss. The woman puts Gilbert in a trance, making him push Alice aside and pounce on Oz. Oz desperately tries to escape the chokehold, but gives up when he sees the scar on Gilbert's chest, the same scar he had given him with his sword. A defeated Oz produces a broken smile, moves Gilbert's gun towards his chest, and shoots. Turns out the bullet wasn't meant for Oz, but instead Gilbert aimed it directly at the member of Baskerville, who, filled with shock, falls backwards, releasing her hold on Gilbert and at the same time dismissing Gledum. The Baskerville woman retreats back to her hideout, knowing fully well, if she continues now, everything will fall apart. Oz looks at Gilbert with hurtful eyes, thanking him for always being there for him when he was small and even now, when he is much older. However, Gilbert is filled with hurt for betraying the Bezarius family and joining the Night Trade instead, after the disappearance of Oz in the Abyss. Oz reassures Gil that they would always be together no matter what, strengthening their childhood bond further. Alice, left to her own thoughts, gets wrapped under an umbrella of memories, bringing back the blood-stained rabbit that has control over her. Those memories fade away, and Oz returns and takes her to the grave, where he found the Pandora watch. A small fragment of Alice's memory is seen, where she is playing around with a blonde-haired man, who tells them the will of the Abyss is watching over them. The fragments start to break, and we are taken to a much gloomier scenario. Alice is tied with chains around a chair, the image of a rabbit orbiting around her. The rabbit approaches Oz, telling him to choose her, but instead he chooses Alice, which enrages the rabbit, causing them to return back to the real world. Oz holding onto Alice's hand throughout. Oz wakes up in Gilbert's house in the capital of Revel. The events of the day before circling in his head, recalling the heart-wrenching words of the rabbit that wanted to take complete control of Oz, leaving nothing for Alice. His thought process is cut short with the appearance of Break, who makes it a comical visit by scaring the hell out of Alice, who trashes the entire room out of anger. Break opens up about himself, telling how he is a contractor who doesn't age due to using contracting methods designed by Pandora. He further explains the Pandora's desire to obtain the will of the Abyss, to have complete control over the chains that linger in it, thus gaining unimaginable power. With a deep, intimidating look at Oz, Break tells him he can't seem to find him before finally disappearing. Oz grabs his chest out of pure pain. The infused needle has now started moving, hinting the start of the countdown. A beautiful girl enters the room with a bouquet of flowers, leaving them on the ground where Oz moans in pain. Gil reads the letter next to the flowers and gives out a surprised look, but doesn't disclose the contents of the letter. They venture out in the marketplace. Oz saves a young boy from bullies. They sit together and talk about each other's families, but when the child asks what happened to Oz's family, a shadow of hurt and melancholy cloud over poor Oz's face. The death of his mother and not knowing how his father looks like has left a hole in his heart. The end.